Good morning, dear students. This is your teacher Neelam Helawat, and we are taking our chapter 22, that is Chemical Coordination and Integration. And this is our lecture number 4. Now, dear students, if you remember, in the previous video, we have started with the various hormones that are produced by the different glands. Now, in this particular lecture, we'll be talking about the glands that are the gonads, the hormones that are being produced from our gonads. So there are two categories of gonads. One is testis. As you can see in the picture, this is testis. So testis is also referred as male gonad. Ovary, as you can see in the picture, it is referred to as the female gonad. Now, as you know, testis is a male gonad and is present in the males. So testis, there are a pair of testis. Okay, there is a pair of testis, as you can see in the picture. This is the internal structure, the anatomy of the testis. And a pair of testis, they are present in a sac-like structure outside the body. And that sac-like structure is called scrotal sac. So testis, they are present in the scrotal sac outside the abdomen. In the scrotal sac, dear students, the temperature is slightly lesser than the body temperature, that it is 2 to 3 degrees Celsius lesser, and this lower temperature favors the maturation of the sperms. Now, this particular testis, it contains the seminiferous tubules and the interstitial tissue. So, two types of components are present in the testis. One is referred to as the seminiferous tubules. If you look into it, this yellow portion indicates the seminiferous tubules. And there are approximately 250 seminiferous tubules in a testis. And the parts in between is referred to as your interstitial tissue. So testis is made up of two parts, seminiferous tubules and the interstitial tissue. Now, in the interstitial tissue, dear students, there are special types of cells which are called Leydig cells. So Leydig cells are present, and these Leydig cells, they produce a hormone which are generally called as androgens. And the example of androgens is testosterone. So Leydig cells which are present in the interstitial tissue, they produce hormones. Those hormones are collectively called as androgens, and the example of androgens is testosterone. So in short, dear students, we can say testis produces a hormone which is called as testosterone. Now, functions. What are the various functions that are being performed by this testosterone, dear students? Right? We'll come to the functions. So first of all, it regulates the development, the maturation of various sex organs like your epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicles, prostate gland and the urethra. So this particular hormones, it brings about the development and maturation of the accessory sex organs. Secondly, this hormone brings about spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis means production of sperms. So this hormone brings about the production of hormones. And at the same time, it also stimulates male sexual behavior. Male sexual behavior means the children, they start maturing in the form of adults, that is male adults, and they develop a behavior just like the adults. There is a growth of muscles, there is a growth of hairs, the child becomes aggressive, and the voice becomes deep. The voice becomes deep. Okay, and this also helps in the anabolism. Anabolism means it helps in the synthesis of proteins and carbohydrates. Now, as you can see in the picture, dear students, in case of male, we can notice that in case of both male and female, there is a sudden increase in height which occurs in this particular age. Then there is a growth of beard and the mustaches. In case of boys, we observe that there is a growth of mustaches and beards, and there is a growth of pubic hair. And at the same time, in case of females, we observe that there is a development of breast and the hips becomes broad, and there is a process of menstruation that starts in females. So second gonad that we are taking is the ovary. Now we know, dear students, now I am highlighting the picture. So there is a pair of ovaries which is present in the females. Okay, so there is a pair of ovaries. This means there is 2 ovaries which are present in females, right? So ovaries are the main reproductive system in case of main part of the reproductive system in case of females. Now ovaries, dear students, it contains follicles. As you can see in the second picture, the ovary contains follicles which are growing in different stages, and it also contains the stromal tissue. So follicles, if you look into the diagram, there are primordial follicles, then there are primary follicles, secondary follicles. Slowly and gradually will develop into the egg or the ovum. So follicles, they can be observed in different stages of the growth, and once the follicles they mature, that is called an egg or the ovum. The release of egg and or the ovum from the ovary is called ovulation. So once the ovulation process occurred, like see, this is the ovulated you can say egg. So whatever the leftover tissue in the ovary is referred to as corpus luteum. Okay, जो टिश्यू आपका बच जाता है जब एग रिमूव हो जाता है, so the leftover portion of the tissue is called as corpus luteum. Clear? And this corpus luteum produces a hormone which is called progesterone. While these follicles that they are which are present in different stages, they produce a hormone estrogen. So in totality, dear students, there are 2 hormones which are being produced from the ovary. One is estrogen and second is progesterone. And both of these hormones, they are referred to as steroid hormones. Both of these hormones, they are steroid hormones. Okay, I hope you are getting me. Okay, and there is absolutely no doubt. Right. So coming to the functions of estrogen. So let's see the first functions of the estrogen. First of all, it brings about the growth and the activities of the female's secondary sex organs. Like as the girl matures, there are certain features that you can say a female undergoes. Certain changes are occurring in the body of the female, like her voice becomes soft, there is a growth of pubic hair, there is the hips becomes broad, there is a development of the breast. So all these changes which are occurring in the body of the female, they are referred to as secondary sex characters. Okay, and the appearance of these characters is only because of the hormone estrogen. Secondly, it helps in the development of the follicles. Now in the previous slide, dear students, we have seen the different follicles, they are present in the ovary in different phases of the growth. So this development is being caused by the estrogen hormone, right? And there is a development of the mammary gland, as I told you, development of the breast. So there is a growth of the mammary gland. And these mammary glands, inside these mammary glands, there is a production of milk will start after the delivery of the child. So all these changes, who is responsible for all these changes? Everyone? Can you name the hormone? Yes, the hormone is estrogen. Now coming to the functions of progesterone. Progesterone is also very, very important hormone. And it performs very important 2 functions. First, it maintains the pregnancy. Okay, it maintains the pregnancy. The child grows inside the womb of the mother for 9 months. So pregnancy is maintained by the level of progesterone. Secondly, once a child is born, then the production of milk in the breast, okay, the production of milk in the mammary gland, that is also being stimulated by this hormone. So it supports the pregnancy, and secondly, it helps in the milk secretion when the child, after the birth of the child. Now dear students, apart from these glands that we have discussed so far, there are some parts, other than these organs, there are other parts of the body that also produces certain important hormones, like the heart. Second is the kidney, and third is your digestive tract, your digestive system. So these 3, they also secrete some very, very important hormones. So let's start with the first, the atrial wall of the heart. Atrial wall means the wall of the atrium. As you can see, these are the walls of the atrium. So the walls of the atrium, they also produce a factor which is called as atrial natriuretic factor. What do we call it, students? Atrial natriuretic factor, that is ANF. And this particular factor, it increases your blood pressure. ये आपके blood pressure को बढ़ाता है because it brings the dilation of the blood vessels. जो आपकी blood vessels हैं उनको dilate कर देता है, and thus it can reduces the blood pressure. So whenever your blood pressure is high due to some any factor, your blood pressure increases. So what will happen? Your blood vessels, this ANF will dilate your blood vessels and the blood pressure will be reduced. So this ANF is only secreted when suddenly your blood pressure increases. Then is GJA of kidney, that is juxtaglomerular apparatus. What is JGA, dear students? Juxtaglomerulus apparatus. Okay. As you remember, we have discussed the parts of the kidney, right? We have discussed the nephron. Okay. So this particular U-shaped structure is called as Bowman's capsule. What do we call it as? We call it as Bowman's capsule. And inside this, there's an extensive supply of blood vessels, coiled blood vessels. They are referred to as glomerulus. And both these structures, they are together referred to as renal capsule. So what is renal capsule made up of? The renal capsule is made up of two parts, glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. Now afferent arteriole will bring the blood and efferent arteriole will take the blood away. Okay. I hope you've understood the juxtaglomerulus apparatus. Okay. Now this juxtaglomerulus apparatus, it produces a hormone which is named as erythropoietin hormone. What do we call this hormone, dear students? Erythropoietin hormone. Okay. And it is a peptide hormone. Now this hormone, it brings about erythropoiesis. Erythropoiesis means formation of RBC. So what is erythropoiesis? RBC formation. So this erythropoietin hormone, it brings about the synthesis of RBC. RBC means your red blood cells. So it helps in the production of RBC. Third is your gastrointestinal tract. Now just look at the diagram, everyone. This is your complete digestive and gastrointestinal tract. That is your liver, stomach. This is your liver, your stomach, the pancreas, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, anus. So this is your complete alimentary canal that we are talking about. Now this particular part, it secretes four very, very important hormones. The first hormone, that is gastrin. जो पहला सबसे important hormone secrete होता है वो होता है आपका gastrin. ये हार्मोन गैस्ट्रिन जो है ये आपकी गैस्ट्रिक ग्लैंड्स पर एक्ट करता है. ओके, द हार्मोन गैस्ट्रिन, इट विल एक्ट अपॉन द गैस्ट्रिक ग्लैंड्स and it will stimulate, it will help in the production of HCl and pepsinogen. तो आपका गैस्ट्रिन हार्मोन आपके यू कैन से स्टमक पर एक्ट करता है और स्टमक आपके गैस्ट्रिक यू कैन से गैस्ट्रिक जूस बनाता है एंड जूस में दो चीज़ों का प्रोडक्शन इंक्रीज करता है. वन इज़ HCl and second is pepsinogen. Now HCl, when it is produced, it maintains the acidic environment in the stomach. Okay, it maintains acidic environment in the stomach, and secondly, it will activate the pepsinogen enzyme. So it will activate the pepsinogen enzyme, and your pepsinogen enzyme, it will act upon proteins and convert them into peptides and peptones. So it is, you can say your hormone gastrin is very, very important. Second is secretin. The second hormone which we have to talk about is secretin. Now secretin जो hormone है basically, dear students, as you can see in the picture. See, let's use a different color so that you can clearly identify. So this particular portion is the pancreas. So your secretin, it acts upon the pancreas, and pancreas, they secrete water and bicarbonate ions. So the hormone secretin, right? The hormone secretin, it will act upon the pancreas and will help in the production or secretion of water and bicarbonate ions. The third hormone that we have to talk about is gastrin inhibitory peptide. That is called as, in short form, we call it as GIP. Now, this GIP hormone, it acts on the stomach, and the stomach stops producing the gastric juice. So gastrin जो है वो gastric juice produce करवाता है, लेकिन gastrin inhibitory hormone जो है वो आपका वो gastric secretion को inhibit करता है, so उसकी production को stop करता है. So gastrin inhibitory hormone or peptide, it acts exactly opposite to that of gastrin. And the last hormone that we have to talk about is CCK, that is cholecystokinin. Okay, cholecystokinin. Now this particular hormone, it acts upon your liver, it acts upon your pancreas and the gallbladder. ये जो आपका हार्मोन है ये पेनक्रियास और गॉल ब्लैडर पर एक्ट करता है और वहाँ से पेनक्रियाटिक एंजाइम्स और बाइल जूस के प्रोडक्शन को रिलीज करता है. सो वी नो डियर स्टूडेंट्स, लिवर प्रोड्यूसेस बाइल जूस and liver stores the bile juice into the gallbladder. So gallbladder will release the bile salts only when CCK will act upon it. And at the same time, it will also act upon the pancreas, and pancreas will produce the pancreatic juice, which contains your pancreatic enzymes like trypsin and lipase. So I hope this is clear. So how many hormones are produced by the pancreas? 2. One is secretin and second is CCK. Or rather I should say 2 hormones act on pancreas. One is secretin, second is cholecystokinin. Right? Okay. So coming to the, you can say the, growth factors. See dear students, there are some other endocrine tissues. देखिए जितने भी हमने टिश्यूज़ की बात की है वो हार्मोन्स प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं. इसके अलावा कुछ और भी नॉन एंडोक्राइन टिश्यूज़ हैं. नॉन एंडोक्राइन टिश्यूज़ मीन्स that they do not have their ducts, they only you can say they have their own ducts. Endocrine means they do not have ducts, non-endocrine means they have their ducts. So they also produce certain hormones and they are referred to as growth factors. So इसके जितने भी अभी हमने टिश्यूज़ की बात की, इसके अलावा भी कुछ और नॉन एंडोक्राइन टिश्यूज़ होते हैं जो कुछ फैक्टर्स को प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, एंड दोज फैक्टर्स दे आर कॉल्ड ग्रोथ फैक्टर्स. And these growth factors, they are essential for the normal growth of the tissues and repairing and regeneration. तो जो ये growth factors produce हो रहे हैं ये बहुत ज़रूरी हैं normal functioning के लिए. So just look at the diagram. Let's see how does these growth hormones they help in the functioning or the growth of the tissues. So whenever there is a growth factor, that growth factor it will bind on the receptors. सो ग्रोथ फैक्टर जब भी प्रोड्यूस हो रहा है वो ग्रोथ फैक्टर प्रोडक्शन के बाद सेल रिसेप्टर्स पर जाकर बाइंड करता है. सेल रिसेप्टर्स मीन्स द रिसेप्टर्स विच आर प्रेजेंट ऑन द सर्फेस ऑफ द सेल. तो ग्रोथ फैक्टर इट विल बाइंड विद द सेल रिसेप्टर and it will form a complex. That complex is called as, what do we call that? Growth factor receptor complex. Now with the help of this receptor, this factor will be transported inside the cell. So ये receptor जो है इस growth factor को cell के अंदर transport करेगा. Now because the factor has been transported inside, this will initiate the protein kinase pathway. तो इस factor की वजह से protein kinase pathway initiate हो जाएगा. Okay, and it will bring about a lot of changes. Now then this will be transported inside the so you can say certain factors, they will be transported inside the nucleus, and it will those factors they will act upon the nucleus, they will act upon the chromosome, and they also bring about the cell division. So growth factors की वजह से आपका kinase pathway initiate हो जाएगा and ultimately the cell division will start. So growth factors, they are very very important. they ultimately bring about the cell division. Okay, they ultimately make a cell to divide. So they initiate the process of cell division in a particular cell. Now, depending upon the chemical nature, okay, depending upon the chemical nature, the hormones can be classified into 4 types. See, so far we have been talking about the various hormones, the glands they are producing the various hormones. But we can categorize all these hormones into 4 categories depending upon their chemical nature. First is like they may be a peptide hormone, polypeptide hormone, or a protein hormone, right? So the example is insulin, glucagon, pituitary hormones, hypothalamic factors. So all the hormones that are produced from the hypothalamus or the pituitary, they come under this category. Second is steroid hormones. Like for example, we can have cortisol, testosterone, progesterone. These all come under the category of steroids. Third is the category which is called as idothyronnins. All the hormones which are produced from thyroid gland, okay, all the hormones which are produced from thyroid gland, they are referred to as idothyronnins. And the last category that we have is amino acid derivatives, means the hormones which contain the derivatives that are made up of amino acid. So example is your adrenaline or non-adrenaline, or we can call them as by another name, that is epinephrine or norepinephrine. So we can have 4 different types of hormones depending upon the chemical nature or depending upon the components they are made from. Now coming to the mechanism of hormone action, means how does a hormone bring about a specific function inside the cell. So hormones, they basically produce their effect. Okay, hormones, they interact with receptors and they then bring about the desired effect. So now let's see what hormones bind with, like what are the various receptors they bind with. So we can say what is a normal pathway for a hormone. So whenever a hormone is produced, the first step is that hormone will reach the cell. Okay, then this will bind with the receptor. So first is you can say the hormone will reach the site, so reaching to the cell or the site. Second is it will bind with the receptor molecule. So when it binds with the receptor protein, the complex is called as hormone receptor complex. तो सबसे पहले आपका हार्मोन का प्रोडक्शन होता है, हार्मोन डिजायर्ड सेल के पास पहुंचता है और वो रिसेप्टर के साथ बाइंड हो जाता है. So after it binds with the receptor, it is called as hormone receptor complex. Okay, what do we call it as? We call it as hormone receptor complex. ठीक है. Now this hormone receptor complex. Now this hormone receptor you can say will bind once it binds to the hormone receptor. Once it forms the hormone receptor complex, then it brings about a lot of biochemical changes in the target tissue. Like here you can see the receptor molecule, it is acting upon the DNA and it is initiating the production of mRNA. Okay, so transcription process going on, and once this RNA is produced, then this RNA will be translated to form the new proteins, and these new proteins, they will be transported to the desired cells. So we can say whenever there is a formation of hormone receptor complex, the hormone receptor complex will start a lot of biochemical changes into the cell, and thus it will regulate its metabolism. Okay, clear everyone? Okay. Now coming to the hormone receptors. Basically we can categorize the hormone receptors into 2 types. First is membrane bound receptors and second is intracellular receptors. Now let's understand this. First of all, just look into the first diagram. This red portion is your receptor. This red portion is your receptor. So the receptors which are present on the surface of the cell, they are called cell surface receptors. So this is your cell surface receptor. Okay, this is called your cell surface receptor. When the receptor is present on the surface of the cell, then we call it as cell receptor. Secondly, you see the receptor is present inside the cell. So that will be called as intracellular receptor. Okay, the receptor when it is present inside the cell, we call it as intracellular receptors. So we can have two types of receptors. One that are present on the surface of the cell, and secondly which are present inside the cell. Okay. So membrane bound receptors and intracellular receptors. Now how does a membrane bound receptor acts? So what basically happens, again let's look into the diagram. So this is a receptor which is present on the surface of the cell. So hormone like FSH will come and bind with the cell surface receptor. Okay, it will bind with the cell surface receptor. Okay, now this cell surface receptor will bring about the first response, and then there will be a generation, or you can say production of the second messenger, that is your cyclic AMP or calcium ions. So these are your second messengers, and these cyclic AMP or calcium ions, they will they will initiate a chain of biochemical responses. Okay, then they will bring about a chain of biochemical responses, and that biochemical responses will then bring about the physiological response like the growth of the ovary. Okay, so hormone will come, it will bind with the surface receptor, then there will first response will be there, then there is a production of cyclic AMP or calcium ions, then calcium ions or cyclic AMP, it will start you can say a chain of changes that we call as biochemical responses, and then due to the production of biochemical responses, then there is physiological changes that will occur in the body, like for example we can have that's the growth of the ovary. Clear? So as we can read it here, so hormones, they will interact with the membrane bound receptors, right? So the hormone will only bind with the receptor, it will not enter the cell. Then it will generate a second messenger, that is your cyclic AMP, calcium ions, IP3, and in turn that will regulate the metabolism and the physiological effects. The second is, like we can take an example here. Let's take an example. Okay. So first of all, let's see the pathway. सबसे पहले आपका हार्मोन जो है वो रिसेप्टर से बाइंड करेगा, हार्मोन रिसेप्टर कॉम्प्लेक्स बनाएगा, फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्स होगा कि सेकेंड मैसेंजर जनरेट हो जाएगा, फिर आपके बायोकेमिकल रिस्पॉन्स प्रोड्यूस होंगे, फिर आपके फिजियोलॉजिकल रिस्पॉन्स प्रोड्यूस होंगे. सो दिस इज यू कैन से बेसिक फ्लो चार्ट फॉर अ मेम्ब्रेन बाउंड रिसेप्टर. The second is your intracellular receptors. Intracellular receptors. Now receptors which are present inside the cell. So what will happen? Like suppose in this case, first of all the hormone will reach the cell. So hormone जो है वो cell के अंदर जाएगा, transport होगा. Like you have estrogen hormone. Okay, it will pass the uterine wall. Okay, estrogen, they will cross the uterine wall and will reach the nucleus of the cell. सेल के न्यूक्लियस के अंदर पहुंच जाएगा. ओके, एंड देन दिस विल बाइंड विद द रिसेप्टर एंड विल फॉर्म अ हार्मोन रिसेप्टर कॉम्प्लेक्स. और फिर ये हार्मोन रिसेप्टर कॉम्प्लेक्स जो है डीएनए के अंदर रेप्लिकेशन स्टार्ट होगा, उससे एमआरएनए बनेगा, देन प्रोटीन्स विल बी फॉर्म्ड एंड देन प्रोटीन्स विल ब्रिंग अबाउट द डिजायर्ड फिजियोलॉजिकल रिस्पॉन्स. एक बार दोबारा से रिपीट करते हैं. इस केस में हार्मोन जो है वो सेल के अंदर एंटर करेगा, रिसेप्टर सेल के अंदर मौजूद है, तो दे विल बी ट्रांसपोर्टेड इनसाइड द सेल. द हार्मोन विल बाइंड विद द रिसेप्टर and it will form a hormone receptor complex. The complex will act upon the DNA and there is a production of mRNA. mRNA will then produce proteins and the proteins will then bring about the physiological response. Okay. So basically these hormones, they mostly regulate the gene expression. तो ये जो इंट्रासेलुलर रिसेप्टर्स हैं और जो हार्मोन्स हैं इस तरीके के, वो आपके अंदर जीन एक्सप्रेशन को रेगुलेट करते हैं. ओके, सो थ्रू द प्रोडक्शन ऑफ mRNA and proteins they bring about the physiological responses. Okay everyone? Okay, so this is how your two receptors, they act on the you can say they act or they bind with the hormones. So the pathways, suppose the hormone will bind to the receptor, then hormone receptor complex will be formed, then it will stimulate, it will act and it will stimulate the genome, that is DNA. So there is a formation of mRNA, then production of protein is there, and then the desired response is brought about. So I hope there is no doubt, dear students. If there is any doubt, any query that you feel, you should contact me on my personal number. So for today, you will be making notes of this topic and you will go through your page numbers 339 to 341. Okay. And dear students, there are certain, as I always tell you, there are certain words which are highlighted with black. So you got to understand those words very, very carefully. Biology is something that you have to read your chapters word by word, line by line. Okay. I hope this much is sufficient for today. Okay. So if there is any doubt you have, you must contact me. Right, everyone? Okay. So bye, everyone.